Hello, I'm Regina Botras, and this is Backstage, where we talk with the who's who on stage, in dance, comedy and performing arts, speaking with the leading theatre makers of our times and how they came to the stage and what drives them and inspires them. Hello and welcome to Stages. Well, I'm joined by Pamela Rabe in the studio here. She is recognised as one of Australia's finest actors with many awards for her stage and screen work. She's also a director for the stage and is joining me to talk about her role in Beckett's Happy Days as Winnie, but also co-directing this production for Sydney Theatre Company at the moment. She's done a wide range of genres of plays all over town. Too many to mention all of them, but a few you might have seen her in. Osage County, 17, The Cherry Orchard, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, The Dance of Death, My Fair Lady, The Glass Menagerie, and so many more. And a number of those I have been so thrilled to get to see. Welcome, Pamela Rabe, to Stages.
Thank you.
So this production, before we get into Samuel Beckett's wonderful Happy Days, existential, I guess, philosophy on marriage and life and all of those things that you can tell me more about, I wondered, you've done so much work over the years. Do you remember why you wanted to be an actor in the first place, or the first production you were in?
First production I was in was a version of Goldilocks in kindergarten, and I got cast in Goldilocks, and it was all downhill from there. I don't know that I was very good. I was very excited because I got a chance to wear my sister's. She'd been a flower girl at my aunt and uncle's wedding, and she had this beautiful dress that I was very jealous that she had the opportunity to wear. And so the whole thing was an excuse just for me to be able to wear the dress that she'd worn as a flower girl. Probably the first performance that really ignited something was I was in year 2, and I think we were doing a version of Alice in Wonderland or something, and I played the Red Queen, and I just suddenly thought, ooh, bitches and villains, this is where it's at. So that kind of started me off, but I never really contemplated performance as necessarily a career. It was just some wonderful thing to play with, something that gave me great joy, kept me creatively silly for a very long time. And then probably in my late teens, I loved movies and I loved radio, particularly loved radio. But in my late teens, I had a few kind of role models in my life who showed me, I guess, that it was something that you could make a career out of if you had the constitution for it. And I went off to acting school, and that kind of set me on my path.
You found the constitution. What did they do that changed your mind, or what did they say, or what is that constitution?
Well, it didn't change my mind. I mean, to commit to acting school, you really, that you throw yourself in the deep end. All I guess I mean is that it was a very intense, very special school that I went to in Canada. You can probably hear this in my hybrid accent. And it was attached to a professional theatre company, so it was a very intensive 2-year course. And in our second year, we were apprenticed onto the main stage in professional productions. And I had the opportunity there to work with people like Tennessee Williams, who was in the room twice, Tennessee Williams.
Wow.
And some of the country's finest performers, and just the nature of the kind of training you'll get, and it's intensive learning by practice, that you come out the other end really groomed to be a stage performer. And and I think I guess that's what I mean, is that it sort of built up a kind of a resilience and a stamina and a ideology and a kind of a value system that kind of carried me right through to here, my extreme old age.
You've played so many roles, but taking acting, like, personally, how has it affected you in your, I guess, identity, or just life skills? I mean, it's so about being present, obviously. But
particularly Winnie in Happy Days.
Yeah,
yes. She is nothing but the present.
Yes.
I don't know. That's a really interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that, really. I mean, it is. It's the only thing I've ever done. Mm. You know, I've pulled beers and I've been a waitress and things like that when I was training. But since I actually embarked on this career, it's the only thing I've ever done, and I don't know what else I could do. So it's dangerously defines who I am in a way. So, I'm always kind of prepared for the troughs and the valleys. I think, or I try to be prepared for them, but I don't know what I would do if I ended up in a very long period of unemployment where my whole sense of self was corroding a little bit. I've, knocking on wood here now, been really, really lucky that I've actually had a pretty steady, solid, slow, and wonderfully stimulating career. I was lucky not to be, just because of the nature of probably the kind of performer I am, the way I look, I was never cast as, the sexy young thing, love object. I always got really interesting roles. I had a really slow gestation, a kind of apprenticeship with the Melbourne Theatre Company through the 1980s. And it was the most wonderful way to learn. There was no kind of great flash and splash. There was a slow kind of long game.
How do you maintain your kind of, I guess, is it self-talk through those troughs and the valleys and the quiet times?
You just make your life hell for your friends and family, and rely on people to kind of, slap you out of it. Really, just sort of to keep your perspective. And as I say, that hasn't been tested too much. I've been incredibly lucky, and partly too. I mean, I'm very lucky to be working for the most part in Australia, although I do work internationally sometimes. But most of my work is in Australia, and we are essentially, we're a small country population-wise, large geographically, and it's a really relatively small pool of artists who are working here, and it requires you to have many strings to your bow, and I've been lucky to be working across screen and stage, and to be directing as well as performing, and all of those things, and occasionally doing some radio, which I used to love doing a lot, but that seems to be dying.
I know.
Radio performance, the radio drama in Australia is kind of gone out the window, which is such a pity because it's such a training ground for writers as well as performers.
Absolutely.
And obviously, I grew up listening to radio drama. It trains your ears as well and your soul.
So, Winnie, how would you, you gave us a little hint of her being present every day, but how would you describe her as a character?
Well, she's an extraordinary creation by Samuel Beckett. She is a woman no longer young, not yet old, who finds herself in a situation that's never really explained, where she is up to her waist in a mound of earth, going about her day, another heavenly day. And it's really a kind of a long existential poem or song, really, almost like a concerto, really, on existence. The nature of how perceptive you can be of not only just the inevitable path of one's mortality, but just also of the kind of obstacles and constraints that you encounter moment to moment living a life. And she's she's got a whole series of tics and routines and rituals that keep the horror at bay. And you kind of hope that those are relatively entertaining. Some of them are pretty inscrutable. It's an extraordinary thing to witness, actually. But in the end, it is, I suppose, a metaphor for existence. And particularly, I would suppose that, it's no accident that Samuel Beckett created. It was a female character. It's not a male.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what do you mean by that?
I guess that he, first of all, I think it's a double-edged sword of kind of, I wouldn't say misogynist, but certainly a kind of a notion of a female sensibility, social sensibility of a particular time. He wrote it in 1961. He wrote it while I was on his honeymoon, which I think speaks volumes.
Wow.
he also, as always with Beckett, his work is very much shot through with his own story, his own autobiography, and clearly I think the impact of, his mother, Mary, who was obviously a big influence in his life, sort of sits underneath some of this. I mean, I've done other Becketts, and it's interesting that in Footfalls, May is the name of the character. He threads his own experience through all of his work. Bibby gets mentioned, who was his governess, in Happy Days. And I think it's... I say it's double-edged because I think it's also full of a great deal of love and affection and admiration for a particular kind of resilience that a female spirit has in adversity. And I think, it's not accidental. I think 61, I think Patrick White was writing about some of the most similar things. He's in a sarsaparilla. Barry Humphries created Dame Edna around the same time. There's a kind of there was a pretty clear seam in social history there, where the post-war Second World War generation were kind of coming up against the boomers, who were starting to kind of wanting to break the shackles of what they saw as a fairly conservative, restricted kind of social system, and we're on the cusp of that big shift in the 60s. Music was changing, everything was changing, and there's a kind of I feel like a natural progression. Visual art was doing it earlier, when you think about the modernists, really, the cubists, and then the surrealists, and there's an element of all of that, what was happening in the visual art world, that you feel that Samuel Beckett's kind of picking up that baton and taking it onto stages, and in a different kind of storytelling, and taking it into a kind of visually poetic world that's exploring some of those same things.
Mm-hmm. You said, and I know that it starts with she's up to her waist in the earth, in dirt, and then by the end it's rising. And acting is such, just in the word, it's action. I mean, you've said that she's got some tics, but what is it like? I mean, you mentioned also constraint, like that constraint as an actor. How is that? What is that like to play emotionally or physically? Yeah.
It's interesting. Oddly enough, the biggest kind of constraint is Samuel Beckett himself, because the script is over half of this extraordinary text. Goes for 90 minutes. The first act is about 60 minutes, 64 minutes, and the last act about 29 minutes. We do it without an interval. Nick Schleiper and I, who have directed this together, really were quite intent on seeing if we could do the whole thing in one hit. Felt that was kind of honouring the integrity of Beckett's vision. Beckett started writing it as a one-actor and then expanded it to two, because he wanted to make a statement about a kind of a change or progression that was happening to Winnie, even though Winnie was finding it difficult to perceive it. I am in a bespoke mound that's been created by the Sydney Theatre Company design team workshop environment. It's an extraordinary piece of engineering. I feel very well supported, particularly for the first act. It gets a little strange when that mound starts to grow, and it is precarious. But I am having to concentrate so very much on this fiendishly difficult text, and it's extraordinary text. It's just, as I said, it's like a concerto or something, or an aria. It requires such kind of muscularity and specificity and attention and articulation and just an act of memory. The kind of the path that I had to burrow into in order to remember this text. It's because it's incredibly difficult. It being Beckett, it's full of non sequitur, apparently disconnected ideas, repeated phrases that go on a loop that have one word, one adjective in a different place. He's playing around. I don't know whether he hated actors or whether he was just... I actually think it's because he had this extraordinary brain, and there's a reason for everything. A bit like Stanley Kubrick movies. There's codes that are built into things for people if they understand the world, Beckett's world. You know, when he constantly misquotes passages from the classics, you know, and Beckett knows that somebody out there will know the reference, the real reference, and it will have meaning for them. There's all sorts of coding that goes into it, and I have to attention must be paid. I have to attend to all that, while at the same time being absolutely present, because if Winnie is nothing else, if just in one fraction of a second at any given time, she's got no concept of what comes after or what comes before.
You said in there in the beginning that she finds it difficult to perceive the world that she's in.
Yeah.
You, as a director and the actor, how is that relationship like? You know, directing yourself, is it like perceive in that similar way, difficult to perceive, or like, I mean, how do you do it? I suppose this is a simple question.
I think it's, I mean, in the end, Nick Schleiper and I we were taking this opportunity with Beckett, partly because Beckett is such a strong presence in any process when you're realizing his work for the stage. He's quite a controlling presence. He gives you lots of
him,
lots of him on the page. And having said that, we thought that he was going to be a presence in the room. That our job in realizing it was going to be about making decisions about the kind of the landscape that Winnie was in. So that involved lots of conversations between Nick and I about the world. Exploring. I've seen many productions of Beckett. I've seen several productions of Happy Days, and we wanted to make sure. You know, there's so many ways you can read this, like as you mentioned it, as about marriage or about climate change or about post-apocalypse or about childhood sexual trauma. There's so many different readings of Beckett's Happy Days that can be made. And we wanted to make sure we weren't kind of narrowing or reducing it down to any one particular one. We wanted to honour what we felt Beckett had been doing. He did 7 or 8 drafts of this play, and each one was a distillation. He was pulling things out, making it pure, taking out specificity, taking out anything that would give you too many concrete clues about what was going on so that you could dream against the work. And that was kind of part of the conversations that Nick and I were having about creating a space that didn't try to solve the play for an audience. It gave them a place where they could reverberate with the play and keep. There's a wonderful quote within the play that when he says that, you know, she's got this strange feeling that someone's looking at her, that she is clear, then dim, then gone, then dim again, then clear again, and so on, back and forth, in and out of someone's eye. And that we felt that was a kind of almost a description of the way we would like to invite an audience to experience the play, is that you're going to be getting all these little provocations and little triggers and little images and word pictures, and just so you can just take it where it takes you, and you may go dim for a minute, then you get pulled in by something else, and it's a different way of experiencing storytelling in a theatre. We don't do that so much. We're pretty now hooked on narratively accessible stuff when we go to the theatre, and to be asked to experience something and attend to it in a slightly different way, I think is a really interesting experiment in these days.
Absolutely. And him being that kind of, existential, philosophical writer in his plays, I wanted to ask you, with your experience of so many classics and new works, are plays, because they are the human experience to some extent, are they all philosophical in some way or not? Like, this feels very much about considering your existence, is my imagining.
I think the act of going to anything, to the theatre, gathering as a group to watch someone tell a story, is a philosophical act. It's a political act. It's an ideological act. It's an act of commitment. It's also an act of respect. It's saying that. I always remember Jonathan Franzen writing an essay about there are very few places in this, in a world where religion is less and less, the prevailing kind of moral code
compass. Yeah.
that there are very few places that we can go now, which are kind of like what going to church was. And he says that there's an art gallery, there's a concert hall, and there's a theatre. And it's we don't kind of get all dressed up now the way we used to necessarily to go to those places, but there is a kind of a tacit contract where we say, we are going to sit here and we're going to hand over for this portion of time that us here together as this group are all going to breathe together and absorb something. And I suppose just even that act gives everything a philosophical kind of core. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be heavy and cryptic and profound, but it can be profane as well. But that's philosophical as well. It can be just sometimes just getting together to howl with laughter with a group of people is a really restorative act of belief. Absolutely.
And transformative. Yeah. So in this concerto of Happy Days, and I can hear how wonderful it must be to hear your voice take us on that kind of musical journey of it. Could you have imagined as the Red Queen? No, I don't know where I'm going with this, but what would you tell now that younger woman who was the Red Queen as an actor? What advice would you give her, or a new actor who new to the stage? If you were teaching, what kind of advice would you give?
I don't know. I'm so bad at those sort of things. I don't know. I don't. I've got too many voices in my head to add another one to it. It's. I think I was really blessed with the kind of experiences that I had quite early, and some great teachers who really were just interested in opening up a sense of play. I also played a musical instrument from a very young age, and I think that had a big influence on... I also come from a big family, so the whole notion of something collaborative... Listen to me. Here I am doing a show with... I'm in a mound, and Marcus Hamilton, who plays my husband, I can't even see and hardly hear. But so it's it sometimes feels a little bit lonely and a bit isolating. But generally speaking, what pulled me into becoming a performer was the notion of collaborative families, of working together creatively with people and playing. Then, after all of that had been really seeded and I got that bug, I learned that there was discipline involved as well. But that came after. And I guess the only advice is just keep enjoying the play, enjoying the child inside you, and trying to avoid self-censure. And in the end, it's not an easy path. So, I mean, I can remember sort of you have to. I'm going to do triple negatives here. You have to not be able to not do it. If you don't absolutely are helpless at committing to it, if you can't not do it, or if you can not do it, don't do it. I guess is what I'm saying. How many bloody negatives am I putting that? It's just you have to be obsessed. It will not sustain you otherwise. And you have to be addicted to precarious existence, because you're always on the edge of a precipice.
That so many negatives end up being a positive in this case. And I can't help but think, as you were saying about the collaborative and the family, in that even if you are the solo person on the stage with your husband behind you, the collaboration is in the room with you and your audience, right? So
absolutely.
There must be something.
And because, and the joy of working with Nick Schleiper, who I have such admiration for. He's an extraordinary designer, lighting designer, just been nominated for a Tony Award for The Picture of Dorian Gray. Yeah, and he's, but also we've collaborated many times. He's lit many shows that I've been in, also shows I've directed. He has designed and lit as well. So we have quite a long, rich history of collaboration. And we looked at this as an opportunity to slightly, I don't know, make the pyramid in the room, the mound in what is in most rehearsal rooms, a kind of a hierarchical thing where the director sits at the pinnacle and everybody else just falls into line. We wanted to kind of flatten that out a little bit and say, let's make it a horizontal collaborative space. You know, Beckett's there waving to us from on high anyway. So why don't we all just make it a really great room where great minds and souls can spark off each other all the time.
Yeah. Oh, Pamela Rabe, thank you so much. Beautiful. It's so lovely to have you in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you. That's sweet words. Thank you. Thanks, Regina.
Well, the absolutely gorgeous Pamela Rabe there in Happy Days on at the Sydney Theatre Company's Wharf 1 at the moment.